Today I'm talking about the second time I went to the hospital. If you're wondering why this is the second time, then there's a playlist that involves the first video in this series with me going to the hospital. Because for those of you that don't know, I've been to the hospital quite a few times as a kid, and even as a teenager now, I still do go quite a lot for just like random medical problems that I end up having. Like for example, 6 months ago, I like had the worst stomach pains on the planet, and I was literally sitting on the toilet for 3 days straight, and I had to go to the hospital for that. But that'll be a separate story time, because today's story time starts off about 6 years ago. This is a pretty crazy story time, so sit back and relax. I was 12 years old, and I broke my left wrist, and I'll tell you all about it today. So again, this story time starts off 6 years ago when I was 12 years old, and for those of you that don't know, when I was a kid, I was very, very athletic, and I played a lot of sports. Now, I still do play sports now. I still do athletics, and I play Australian rules footy, which for those of you that don't know is basically a sport where there's like 2 teams at 18, and on either side there's like 4 goalposts, and all you gotta do is get the footy through the goalpost. It's sort of like American football, but like you can't throw the ball, you have to handball it. It's very weird for you Americans, you probably wouldn't understand it, but yeah, that's basically what it is. But anyway, this story time starts off as an athletics day, right? So it's a Saturday morning, it's the middle of summer, because athletics is a summer sport. We only do athletics in the summer, like track and field. So it's a Saturday morning, it was about 8 a.m, and normally we have to get there at like 8:20, so we're already running late, so we ended up having to sprint over to this athletics track. Now this day of athletics was it wasn't like any normal one, because normally we only do 5 events, and you know, we just leave. But today was championship day, basically meaning that like you were competing for a medal, right? You were competing to get first, second, third. Obviously first would get gold, second would get silver, third would get bronze, you know, and that's basically how the day worked. So I was running 5 events, right? And the events were the 80-meter hurdles, the 60-meter hurdles, an 800-meter run, triple jump, and high jump. Now these are all probably my favorite events at the time. I absolutely love them. I don't run 800s anymore. I really am not fit enough to run an 800 now, but I still do high jump and triple jump and just all like the jumping events. I really do like the jumping events. They're really good. But yeah, so my first event of the day was the 60-meter hurdles. Now I thought, you know what, this is going to be easy run. Like not to brag or anything, but I was probably the best in the age group that I was in. So I basically knew I was going to win gold. Keep in mind, right, I trained for hurdles, like I trained for the hurdles probably like 3 times a week. Like I was probably the best in my age group at it. And I don't say that just to brag, like I'm saying that to be dead ass. Like I was probably the best in my age group. Like I was really, really good at it. And I still am okay at it, but definitely like nowhere near it, like to the comparison of everyone else, nowhere near where I was back then. So anyway, I ran this 60-meter hurdles, and I was like, you know what, this is gonna be an easy run. I'm just gonna run through and I'm gonna win the whole thing, you know, it'll just be easy. So I ran right, and I jumped over the hurdle, and as soon as I go over the first one, I immediately so keep in mind, I've never tripped on a hurdle in my life. I've never hit the barrier before. I tripped on the first barrier and went flying into the floor. And oh my god, when I tell you this hurt. Literally the first hurdle I tripped over, and immediately I've got like my family in the back saying, oh, get up and keep going, get up and keep going. Which you might think that's such a dumb thing to do, like you literally just fell over. But they were just encouraging me, like they didn't know I was actually hurt. So I sat there for a minute, I'm like, oh my god, I'm not getting up and running. That hurts so bad. So I end up sitting there, and then I have some other parent like who has to come onto the track and like pick me up because I'm just in so much pain. Keep in mind, right, I'm 12 years old at this time, so you know, I did not expect this to happen. So I'd fallen over, and I got picked up off the track, and basically I didn't finish. I didn't qualify for the final, but you know, it was just, it is what it is. Like I didn't really mind too much, because the 80-meter hurdles was probably my favorite event, and I was a lot more worried about the 80-meter hurdles than I was about the 60. So you know, I just shrugged that off. Like it's sort of, the pain sort of went away after about 2 minutes. Like it really wasn't that bad, and I did land on my left wrist, so I don't know if that contributed to this next part of the story that I'm about to tell you, but it was definitely, it might have. I don't know. I'll let you guys know. So it gets to be about, I don't know, 9 a.m. So I've already done the 60 hurdles. I failed on the first hurdle. Then I did triple jump, high jump, and then there were 2 more events to go. So the last 2 events that I had were the 80-meter hurdles and the 800-meter sprint, right? So these 2 events were going to be the most hell of my whole life. So the first event to get called is the 80-meter hurdle. So I get up, I grab my running shoes, I grab my bag, and I walk over to the event. And then I sit down, and I'm like, please, for the love of God, can I just not fall fall over a hurdle. Like that's all I have to do. And I didn't, right? I ran the race, and you know, I got first, obviously, because I'm just the best, you know. I flawlessly ran every single hurdle, you know. I won quite easily. And then obviously, right, I made it to the final. So basically, so how it worked is there were like 4 heats, right? And the top 8 from those heats would end up going into a final. I qualified first in my final, meaning I was literally in like the 3rd lane. Like I was literally just gonna win. So about an hour later, they call us again for the final, and you know, I end up lining up. I put down my blocks, and you know, I'm getting ready to run. Now this is where everything sort of kicks off. So at this point, I'm like, okay, all I have to do is clear every hurdle. I'll probably get a gold medal. I just don't fall on one of the hurdles. And you know, the race starts. We end up going over the first hurdle, fine. Second hurdle, fine. Third hurdle, fine. I end up going through all the hurdles flawlessly. You know, I was probably winning by about like 1 hurdle at this point, like 1 length of a hurdle. And then it gets to the last hurdle. I'm like, okay, yeah, I've got this in the bag, right? Like, there's nothing that can stop me now. Little did I know something was gonna stop me. This last hurdle, I don't know what sort of death wish that hurdle had for me. I don't know why it decided to just stop me in my tracks, but I try to jump over the hurdle, and my back leg clips it, and I instantly fall to the ground. And yeah, I ended up cracking my left wrist, and it hurt. When I tell you this hurt, it really hurt. So I sat there for a bit, just crying in pain, right? At this point, everyone's ran past me. Like I couldn't even finish at this point. Like I was literally just on the floor. Again, I got people telling me to get up and finish, and I'm just sitting there like, I am in so much pain. Like the last thing I'm thinking about right now is finishing the race. So eventually one of the officials comes over, helps me up, you know, gets me to first aid, and you know, they help me out a lot. They basically just like put an ice pack on my wrist and everything like that. And I sort of sat there for a minute. The pain, like I don't know why, but the pain like went away a little bit. So and I got called for the 800 meters while I was in the first aid room. So they basically said, right, do you think you're fit enough to run the 800? Like like you seem okay. Like are you okay to do it? And if you can't do it, please tell us. Like don't push yourself, please. Like that. Like the last thing we want is to make your break even worse. And I was like, yeah, you know, I think I feel alright. I think I'm gonna run an 800. This right here was probably the worst mistake in my life. And if you're in the same predicament, which I don't know why you would be, but if you are, please do not run races if you're in pain or just something like that. Like please just take it off. Like it's not that big of a deal. Unless you're running like the Olympics or something and you dead ass need to be there and need to run. Like you just don't, alright, please. So I sat there as a 12-year-old, you know, I'd probably just cracked one of my bones, but you know, I was like, you know, I'll run an 800, right? I'm gonna run the 800. Biggest mistake in my life. So I end up walking over to the 800, and I put my running shoes on again, and you know, the race ends up starting. Everyone lines up. They say, on your marks, go, and then we end up running. So for the first like 200 meters, I was in 3rd place, right? Like I was making some pretty good pace, and then eventually around the 200 to 300 meter mark, I end up feeling probably the worst pain of my life. My wrist starts throbbing, right? Like I was like, oh my god, that was a terrible idea. Why am I running right now? Now this isn't anything against my parents or anything, but how I was basically brought up is that like you don't stop something. Like if you start something, you gotta finish it. So in my mind, I was like, okay, I cannot stop this race right now. I need to finish this, and then we'll sort out my wrist. Now how an athletics track work is that it's basically 400 meters, so we had to do 2 laps. So when we went back to the start, right, so we'd end up completing 400 meters. By this point, I was in tears, right? Like I was like, oh my god, this hurts so bad. And I got people telling me, you gotta stop, like we gotta help you out, like just stop running, like this is not healthy for you. But you know what? I didn't listen to them, and I kept running the full race. Don't ask me why I did that, alright? I genuinely don't know. I just kept running, and then I ended up probably hurting myself even more doing that. So I ended up running the whole race. I think I finished about 3rd last because I was going so slow to the point where like I couldn't go any faster if I wanted to just keep my sanity. So I ended up hobbling over the finish line, and I think I ran about 3 minutes 30, which is absolutely awful, by the way. Like I think my best at the time was like 2 minutes 47. So it was awful, right? It was awful, but I didn't care, right? I was just happy that I'd finished the race. Like I just wanted to go home. I didn't want to go home. I wanted to go to the hospital. So at this point, my mum picks me up, basically just grabs me, and she's like, yo, we gotta go to the hospital right now. Like you clearly, like your wrist is clearly not okay. I was like, yeah, probably. And I was like crying and everything. It was very tragic. So we end up going into the emergency room, and this nurse basically comes out and says, okay, what's happened here? And my mum basically explains how I was doing the hurdles and I fell over, and then I run an 800 meter, and she said, you ran an 800 meter after falling on hurdles and hurting yourself. Like, why? And I said, I don't know. I felt up to it. Like I felt physically fit to do it. And she said, oh my god, okay, just come with me. So we end up going into this x-ray room, right? And she puts my wrist up on this little table and puts this little machine over it to basically scan my arm to make sure that everything's okay. Little did I know, no, not everything was okay. In fact, that there was quite a lot wrong with with my wrist. So they basically, they took the x-ray pictures. They said come back in about 15 minutes and I'll basically have my results back. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. We went back into the waiting room. Then they went into the room and they called for Ricky. So I ended up walking back into the emergency room, like this little room where they did the x-ray. And this nurse basically explains to me that I have, for the second time in my life, broken my arm, and I've broken my left wrist. It wasn't like a full breakage, but it was like a fracture, right? So they ended up putting a cast on my arm, and they said it was going to take like 6 weeks to heal or something like that. So they went into this room, they basically like moisturized my arm, and they basically just put this little thing over it. Luckily for me, it wasn't a break in my elbow, meaning that I could still bend my elbow and all that sort of stuff. I just couldn't move my wrist around, which is kind of annoying. And the cast kind of like stunk a lot, which was also another thing, but you know, that's just what happens, right? Yeah, so this is the story of me breaking my arm. Moral of the story, there really isn't a moral, I guess. Oh, actually, yes, there is. No, if you're hurt, don't run, okay? Give yourself time to heal, okay? You just don't. Yeah, thank you all for watching. If you want to send in story times, go to my Instagram at GliderGuyYT, and you might be featured in a new video. And yeah, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.